Okay, let's unpack this. We have this incredibly rich stack of sources in front of us, all detailing one of the most unique and symbolically dense works in Portuguese literature, Fernando Pessoa's Mensagem, or Message.
It's just an indispensable body of work.
Yeah.
I mean, if you want to understand not just Portuguese literature, but the whole psychology of a nation dealing with a kind of existential crisis, this is it.
Right. And our mission here is to sort of shortcut the complexity. This isn't just a literary analysis, it's a deep dive into myth, prophecy, and really the spiritual architecture of a national identity.
Exactly. We want to understand how Pessoa systematically used Portugal's past, its heroes, its history, even its defeats, to chart this visionary, deeply spiritual destiny for his nation, this thing he called the Fifth Empire.
And the context is just so vital here. Pessoa, who is famously fragmented by his own, internal heteronyms, he publishes Mensagem in 1934. And what's remarkable is that it was the only complete book of Portuguese poetry published under his own name during his lifetime. That fact alone tells you this work was uniquely important to him. It was a singular, focused transmission.
And the timing couldn't have been more loaded. I mean, Portugal in the 1930s was economically fragile. Politically, it was locked down under the authoritarian Estado Novo regime.
Salazar's regime.
Yeah, Salazar's, yes. And Portuguese identity was fractured. They were trying to reconcile this magnificent past as maritime conquerors with their modest peripheral present. There was this palpable crisis of self-definition.
Which makes Pessoa's response so fascinating, because when a poet faces that kind of crisis, you might expect, I don't know, revolutionary poems or just sheer despair.
Right.
But Pessoa chose a completely different path, almost an alchemical one. He addressed the national crisis not with politics or jingoism, but with, as the sources keep saying, myth, dream, and vision.
Well, what's truly fascinating is that Mensagem functions as a spiritual biography of Portugal. It meticulously tells the symbolic history of the nation.
From its foundation.
Right, from its foundation through the spectacular height of its maritime empire to its agonizing decline, and then finally this hope of rebirth. But it's not a patriotic textbook.
No, not at all.
He organized the nation's entire past as this necessary initiatory path toward a spiritual destiny.
I found the irony of its reception so telling. It actually received an official prize, which seems completely counterintuitive for a work so esoteric.
You'd think the regime wouldn't touch it.
Exactly. But the prize was only for its moral intent, not its literary merit. It seems like they recognized the nationalistic tone, but completely missed the profound, mystical, and frankly subversive layers just beneath the surface.
And that oversight is quintessential Pessoa. He spoke to the nation using a language of patriotism, but he injected it with this profound Rosicrucian esoteric symbolism that the establishment they couldn't decipher it.
Even the title, Mensagem.
Yes, the title. One source translates it as, "Blessed be the Lord our God who has given us a sign," which tells you this is meant to be a revelation, a message to unveil a divine, preordained design for the nation.
That sets the stage perfectly. So let's jump into part one, which addresses the very foundations of this destiny. We start with the coat of arms, or Brasão. This whole segment symbolizes the origin and foundation of Portuguese nationality. It's like Pessoa is performing a kind of symbolic archaeology. He's revisiting founding figures and national symbols, not to recount history factually, but to reveal their symbolic significance.
Precisely. It's heraldry elevated to prophecy. And he begins this symbolic journey with geography, immediately shifting Portugal out of a purely physical space and into a metaphysical one.
In the section called The Fields.
The fields, yes.
Yeah.
Which represents the consolidation of the kingdom and the nature of the land itself.
And the centerpiece here is Europe's symbolic geography. Pessoa likens the map of Europe to a reclining woman propped on her elbows, gazing from east to west. It's such a classical mythological image.
It's a stunning piece of poetic mapping. She's lying there, gazing, fixed in this position of contemplation. But the essential twist, the turning point of the poem, is delivered immediately.
The face with which she gazes is Portugal.
Exactly. And that instantly assigns Portugal this specific, future-oriented spiritual role. Europe is focused on the past, the origins in the East, but Portugal, as Europe's face, has to look toward the West, toward the unknown, the mystery.
Leading Europe and the world spiritually into the future.
Right. And he even breaks down the symbolic face. The romantic hair refers to the countries with Latin-derived languages, hinting at that shared cultural legacy.
And the Greek eyes.
The Greek eyes, a clear nod to the classical origins of European culture, ancient Greece.
And that gaze itself. It's described as sphinx-like and faded, enigmatic, demanding an answer, but also predestined.
Yes, and when he says Europe gazes toward the West, future of the past, that is such a profound statement. The West is the sea, the unknown, where Europe, through Portugal, launched the discoveries. It's the future because humanity's fulfillment is expected there, but it is the future of the past because it's the destiny that was pre-written in the foundational myths.
Okay, here's where it gets really interesting. The philosophical core of it all, in his discussion of Ulysses, the legendary founder of Lisbon,
Hmm.
this is where we find that famous kind of mind-bending philosophical nugget. Myth is the nothing that is everything.
We have to spend some time here because this quote is the key to the whole book.
Absolutely.
Why is it nothing? Because factually, historically, it's false. Ulysses, the hero of the Odyssey, did not literally sail to the Iberian Peninsula and found Lisbon.
It's nothing in the material positivist sense.
Right, but it is everything. Why? Because the nation that created or adopted that myth governs itself by it. Myth is a spiritual reality, a creative force that guides the nation's evolution and unveils a hidden truth. The collective beliefs in the myth makes it real and its effect on the national aspiration.
Pessoa puts it so beautifully. He says Ulysses, the legendary hero, existed precisely because he was not real.
It was for not being that he came to exist. He just sort of insinuated himself into the collective consciousness, flowing into reality and making it fruitful.
So the nation needs these persistent, shaping narratives. Narratives that transcend the messy reality of political history, which leads us seamlessly into the castle section, where historical figures are reframed as just mere instruments of a higher power.
And this is a crucial theological argument in Pessoa's vision. He writes, "Every beginning is involuntary. God is the agent. This just strips human free will of its primacy in these huge historical moments,
So humans are just interpreters of divine will.
often performing great deeds confusedly, completely unaware of the larger plan they're serving."
You see this with the earliest figures, like Count Henry, who contributed to Portugal's future independence. The sources say he raised his sword not knowing what to do with it.
He was a man of action, but his actions were, not consciously directed toward independence. Yet the work destined for him was done by God's will. His confusion is actually proof that a higher hand was guiding everything.
And that pattern continues with Afonso Henrique, the king who secured independence. His success in battle seemed unforeseen and improbable given the forces against him.
And Pessoa frames that improbability as confirmation that he wasn't acting on his own strength. He was just fulfilling what God had fated. His historical mistakes actually become proof of the divine blueprint.
This theme of necessary sacrifice and divine imposition really gets crystallized in the Quinas, the 5 small shields that make up the central symbol on the coat of arms. They explicitly symbolize the 5 wounds of Christ.
And this is where suffering is introduced, not as a tragic consequence, but as a necessary prerequisite for spiritual achievement. The message here is starkly anti-materialist, which is a clear rebuttal to the economic hardship of 1930s Portugal.
He's basically telling the struggling nation that their material poverty is a necessary part of their spiritual ascent.
Right. The sources really drive home this idea that the gods sell when they give. Glory isn't a gift. It's bought with misfortune and suffering. It's a very tough spiritual economy.
It's absolute renunciation, and he warns fiercely against contentment. To have is to delay. Possession delays spiritual achievements.
So in this schema, happiness is seen as dangerous, fleeting, insignificant. Woe to the happy, for they are only what passes. The people who are content with just material happiness, they don't leave a mark on history.
Yeah, that completely reframes the economic crisis of the Estado Novo. It turns poverty from a national embarrassment into a spiritual distinction.
And this anti-materialism extends to historical figures, especially King Dennis. He's called the planter of ships to be.
This part is fascinating. His greatest historical legacy often seems kind of mundane. He ordered the planting of pine woods near Leiria to stop coastal erosion.
Right, a practical decision. But Pessoa transforms this act of, forestry into a prophetic, forward-looking action. He says these pine woods yearn for the sea. Their obscure murmur is the sound of the future sea, waiting to be built into the caravels of the discoveries.
So he was literally preparing the raw material that would launch the empire decades before the Age of Discoveries even began.
The king, acting as a forester, a man of culture, was unknowingly part of this divine project. The stream seeks the ocean, and the pine woods seek the ships. This whole first segment, the Brasão, It just solidifies the idea that Portugal was completely predestined.
That its foundation was merely the unfolding of a concealed mystical plan.
And we can't leave this segment without talking about the illustrious generation, the children of King John I and Philippa of Lancaster, which included Prince Henry the Navigator.
Right, and Philippa is not just a queen. She is called the Princess of the Holy Grail.
Wow.
The moment the Grail symbolism enters, you know this is a fully esoteric vision.
Of course. The Grail is the ultimate symbol of perfection, union, peace. By associating the foundation of the Portuguese Empire with the Princess of the Holy Grail, Pessoa makes the entire age of discoveries an echo of the Grail quest itself.
A spiritual search not for wealth or territory, but for enlightenment.
And it's all setting the stage for the next conquest. The material kingdom is built, but its ultimate purpose is to launch the nation into the great unknown, the sea, to fulfill that Grail quest.
A perfect transition. That takes us right into part 2, the initiatory path.
So now we enter Mara Portuguese, the Portuguese Sea, which symbolizes the age of discoveries. Now, historically, this was the construction of the material empire, but Pessoa immediately reframes this huge geographical expansion. It is fundamentally an initiatory path, a colossal trial necessary to prepare the nation for the spiritual Fifth Empire.
The entire section is titled Possessio Maris, the possession of the seas. The sea itself is treated as an active living symbol of life, death, danger, but also a reflection of the sky.
So the material conquest of the sea was actually an active spiritual conquest, fulfilling a divine will for knowledge.
And this whole process is defined by what Pessoa calls the creative trinity, his formula for ultimate achievement. God wills it, man dreams, the work is born.
That's the ultimate synthesis. Divine will provides the necessity, human imagination provides the blueprint, and then historical realization follows. It needs both.
And audacity is embodied by Prince Henry the Navigator, who's referred to as the Griffin's Head. He is the dreamer, the one who initiates the spiritual quest. He's called the only true emperor who holds the whole world globe in his hand.
That's such a profound philosophical move. Pessoa elevates the idealist, the prince, above the material kings and emperors who historically held physical globes.
Right.
Only the dreamer, Henry, truly held the world in the ideal sense.
Right.
The sources describe his solitude as a cloak of night and solitude. He had to isolate himself to foster the idealization that led to the great deeds.
So solitude isn't loneliness, it's a crucible for divine idealization. Now let's look at the sea itself as this metaphor for knowledge. When the poem discusses the horizon, it says the fear of the unknown, the dread of the abyss, was essentially an illusion. O sea that was before us, your fears had coral and beaches and forests.
The fear was just conceptual, projected onto the unknown. Once the distance, the metaphor of the unknown, was faced and crossed, the void was replaced by reality. The search along that cold, fearful line of the horizon leads to the well-deserved kisses of truth.
The sea voyage is clearly an initiatory journey. It results in knowledge and clarification. It brightened as it ran.
But no great achievement comes without a cost. This is the segment that addresses the heavy human cost of the discoveries. And Pessoa raises the question we all ask when we look at epic history. Was the conquest worth the immense suffering, the loss of life?
And the famous answer, which is so often quoted out of context, is all is worth it if the soul is not small.
This is really the centerpiece of Mensage's morality. The requirement for achievement is absolute commitment and sacrifice that transcends mere physical pain.
As the sources say, he who wants to go beyond the Cape of Bojador must go beyond pain.
Right. The sea contains danger and abyss. But if your soul is small, meaning if your aspiration is material, personal, or fleeting, then the suffering is meaningless. But if the soul is great, dedicated to the ideal, then all sacrifice contributes to that sublime national ideal.
It demands an internal transformation first. And a perfect historical example for this is Bartolomé Dias, the captain of the End. He faced and conquered the terrifying Cape of Storms, which was immediately renamed the Cape of Good Hope.
It's the same piece of geography, but the psychological landscape has been fundamentally altered. The sea is the same, but the internal perspective has changed and no longer frightens. Dias overcame the internal obstacle.
And his epitaph in the poem connects the Portuguese effort to the Greek myth of Atlas.
Yes, Atlas lifts the world on his shoulder. Likewise, the Portuguese carry the weight of embracing the world through knowledge. It's not just a burden of empire, it's his colossal responsibility of discovery.
This distinction helps us understand the tragedy of the material empire. Pessoa dedicates a poem, Standard, to the stone pillars the Portuguese planted to mark their conquests. And the speaker recognizes that material effort has limits. He says, "The sea with end will be Greek or Roman. The endless sea is Portuguese."
That is an incredibly powerful line. It synthesizes the entire transition from material to spiritual.
The Mediterranean, the contained, measurable sea, belonged to past finite empires.
Exactly. But the vast, limitless ocean belongs to the Portuguese because their spiritual quest for truth and knowledge, symbolized by the infinite sea, is unending. They'll continue to sail because there is always more to discover, even if the geographic discoveries end.
And this highlights the spiritual cost of tearing the veil of material mystery. Look at Fernando de Magalhães, the circumnavigator. His journey made the Earth a single entity and tore the last geographical mystery, thereby violating the Earth.
And the Earth, viewed as this living, mysterious entity, avenged itself through the savages who killed him.
The sources describe the natives dancing, completely unaware that the man they just killed has ended their geographical isolation forever. They remain in the solitude of ignorance.
Right. Magalhães fulfilled the material dream of Prince Henry, but in doing so, he removed the great external challenge. The age of discoveries had climaxed.
Yes, the sea was fulfilled, unveiled. But the empire fell apart, which leads to the lament that closes the section. Lord, Portugal has yet to be fulfilled.
The material conquest was completed, but the promised spiritual fulfillment that the discoveries were only supposed to initiate, it hadn't arrived.
And the section concludes with the tragic figure of King Sebastian, whose last ship departed under an ill-starred, ominous sun, symbolizing the immediate eclipse of Portugal.
This is the moment the soul went missing. The people are downcast, they've lost their belief in the national dream, and Pessoa sees this decline, this night has come and the soul is base, as a direct commentary on the moral bankruptcy of 1930s Portugal.
But he concludes part 2 with the definitive statement. The ultimate aspiration must be to conquer distance again, either of the sea or other, but let it be ours.
This shift is explicit, from the material sea to the boundless spiritual distance.
Which sets us up perfectly for the final, most mystical segment, the prophecy.
We've arrived at part 3, the hidden one, O Encoberto. And this is the most mysterious and crucial part. It's all about the current situation of Fog Sarasom, this uncertainty, this national crisis, and the ultimate hope for the Fifth Empire.
And the sources are really clear. This entire section hinges on Sebastianism, but not as a literal physical return of the dead king.
No.
It's a metaphor for renewed national hope. King Sebastian, the one who disappeared without a body, Al-Kaiser Kebir, he is the desired one, the spiritual catalyst.
The prophecy is rooted in idealization, echoing that formula from part 2. God wills it, man dreams. Pessoa channels Sebastian saying, "It is what I dream myself to be that eternally endures, that is he in whom I shall return."
So the dreamed greatness, the ideal king, the ideal Portugal, it rises above physical death and becomes immortal.
It elevates the power of the dream to a state of eternal being. And the pursuit of this dream justifies the irrationality involved. This is where Pessoa introduces his philosophical defense of madness.
Yeah. The sources note the key question. Without madness, what is man more than the healthy beast?
This is a direct challenge to utilitarian reason. Dreaming the impossible, the spiritual empire, the return of the vanished king, is categorized as madness by the pragmatic world, but it's the absolute prerequisite for achieving something truly glorious.
The healthy beast is content with survival and physical happiness, which Pessoa already dismissed as a delay.
Exactly. The true human is defined by the divine madness of unreachable aspiration.
And Pessoa connects himself directly to a line of prophecy that has sustained this dream for centuries. He discusses the prophetic voices that foretold this return. First, Bandara.
A 16th century shoemaker from Trancoso. Pessoa regarded him as a genuine, anointed prophet consecrated by God with the gift of prophecy regarding the Fifth Empire.
And Bandara's prophecies were folk literature, deeply rooted in the popular imagination, which gave them immense cultural power.
Then Pessoa places Father Antonio Vieira in this lineage, the 17th century Jesuit preacher and emperor of the Portuguese language. He was this great orator whose writings interpreted Bandara's texts and scripture.
And he foretold King Sebastian's return as a clear omen of moonlight.
Right, but then Vieira corrects himself. He says, no, it is not moonlight. It is light of the ethereal. It's not a mere reflection. It's the direct, unreal dawn of the Fifth Empire that is already gilding the banks of the Tagus River, just waiting.
And Pessoa steps into this ancient lineage, positioning himself as the culmination of the prophetic tradition.
He speaks as the successor, the man of reason who knows and who waits. Unlike the others, Pessoa doesn't rely purely on scripture or folk intuition. He uses reason informed by the prophetic tradition to announce the necessity of the Hidden One's return.
Now, let's define the central, monumental concept, the Fifth Empire. It's so important to be clear that the meaning is not military conquest or territorial expansion.
Not at all. It is strictly an empire of spirit, culture, and knowledge, universalist and humanist in scope.
And to grasp its significance, we have to revisit the source of the prophecy. The Book of Daniel, specifically Nebuchadnezzar's dream of the statue made of 4 metals.
Daniel describes the statue as having a head of gold for Babylon, breasts and arms of silver for the Medes and Persians, belly and thighs of bronze for Greece, and legs of iron representing Rome.
But the feet are part iron, part clay, symbolizing the fragmentation and eventual death of Rome and its successors.
Pessoa adopts this schema. He sees the 4 historical empires as Greece for culture, Rome for law and order, Christianity for faith, and then the fragmenting modern Europe. These 4 must age and die.
The Fifth Empire, which Daniel described as a stone cut without human hands that destroys the statue and fills the whole earth, that's Pessoa's ultimate vision. It is where one lives in light, in truth. It's the new earth and the new heavens.
It's the ultimate spiritual transformation. And the leader of this transformation, the desired one, is likened to Galahad, the virgin knight of the Arthurian Round Table, who achieved the vision of the Holy Grail.
So just as Galahad brought spiritual perfection, Sebastian, the desired one, is meant to reveal the Holy Grail, symbolizing the union, peace, and happiness of all peoples under the banner of Portuguese spiritual knowledge.
This intense mysticism is reinforced by these clear Rosicrucian influences. We can't gloss over this.
No, the sources really emphasize its importance, particularly in the structure of the final section.
The Rosicrucian influence is structural. It speaks to the idea of a secret, learned group guiding destiny toward a peaceful world. The central symbol of Rosicrucianism, the rose and the cross, appears directly in Mensagem.
The dead cross of the world and the rose of life, what's the interplay there?
Well, the cross represents the initiatory trials, the suffering, the material burdens Portugal carried in the Marble Portuguese. It's the pain that has to be overcome. The rose, appearing at the center, is the symbol of perfection, the ultimate spiritual goal. The entire national history is viewed as an alchemical process. The material nation, the cross, must undergo suffering to achieve spiritual transformation, the rose, which leads to the Fifth Empire.
And this national transformation requires a climax, which Pessoa defines by the current state of national inertia, the fog, or serasum.
Right. Everything is uncertain and final. Everything is scattered. Nothing is whole. O Portugal, today you are fog.
This darkness, this present crisis and lack of definition that defined Portugal in the 1930s is paradoxically presented as the required sign.
So the deepest crisis marks the climax immediately preceding the return. It's the inner turmoil of Portugal aspiring to be the nation of the Fifth Empire. The fog is the moment when the material vision fails, forcing the nation to look inward.
And in the poem Storm, the crisis itself becomes the moment of divine clarity. In this darkness of ignorance, God indicates his design for a brief, blinding instant.
And that's the genius of the book's conclusion. It takes the most humiliating historical event, the disappearance of the king, and transforms it into the source of Portugal's greatest potential. It turns historical defeat into a guaranteed future spiritual victory.
And the final, intense, prophetic climax is Pessoa crying out from the mist, an observer transformed into a participant. It is the hour.
Signaling that the time of fulfillment is at hand, waiting only for the leader, the hidden one, to appear from the mist and guide the nation toward the spiritual empire. It's an open ending, a call to action through belief.
It forces the nation to act on its collective dream, transforming its past shame into future glory. It's one of the most intellectually robust forms of national myth-making ever attempted.
So if we connect this all to the bigger picture, Mensagem remains profoundly relevant today because it addresses these universal themes of crisis, identity, and future aspiration. Pessoa reminds us that nations, and by extension individuals, live as much from their past, the myths they internalize, as from the dreams they hold for the future.
Absolutely. It's a complete roadmap for dealing with uncertainty, where material failure is just a trial run for spiritual success. The central themes are so beautifully intertwined. Sebastianism as a metaphor for renewed hope, mysticism as the path to perfection, and the dream as the ultimate creative guiding force.
The core takeaway is the insistence on the spiritual over the material. From the Aquinas, where to have is to delay, to the more Portuguese, where the true sea is endless, Pessoa redefines national aspiration. The material empire fell apart precisely because it was finite. The next empire has to be one of pure spirit, knowledge, and culture.
We learn that the endless sea is Portuguese, meaning the spiritual quest for truth and knowledge is unending and universally applicable. We saw how the material sea was conquered, forcing Portugal to look beyond the horizon. And this raises that final provocative question for you, the listener. If the material distance has been covered in our own lives, if the career has been achieved or the financial stability secured, what is the other distance? The boundless spiritual challenge that we must now set sail to conquer.
That is the ultimate challenge Pessoa leaves us with. It forces us to ask, what dream are we nurturing today? What myth are we actively embodying that will become the spiritual reality of tomorrow for ourselves and our community? Are we settling for the fleeting happiness of a healthy beast, or are we embracing the necessary madness of the visionary?
A profound challenge to end this deep dive. If this conversation about myth, madness, and destiny has resonated, and you want to explore the spiritual architecture behind your own national or personal identity, please subscribe and share your own interpretations of the endless sea Pessoa describes. We look forward to diving deep with you again soon.
Subscribe to the Timeless Tales podcast. Your stories, your time.